No matter how elevated or spiritual you may have come to find that person, yes, even that person has to make a tent sometimes. Welcome to the Perceptive Readers, everyone. Hi, I'm James Lynch. What do I mean by that elevated or spiritual minded person having to make a tent sometimes? It basically means they need an occupation. They need to work at times to bring in the income or the resources for their bodies, do they not? And also for the assignment that they may be on. Now, unless otherwise told, this is what has been placed upon every human being on the face of this earth, especially starting with the men. And if they have a head, head of the family, and in that role and position, they have been charged, you see, by God himself. He even said, if you don't take care of your family, then you know what? You're worse than a person even without the spiritual backing, or as the good book says, a person without faith. So you can see when a man has that focus at times, you see, they are doing what they're supposed to do. And that's wonderful that they have that desire. Now, looking at some of the examples that we've seen, to actually give you something as a reference point. The person who I talked about tent making, the reason why I use the example was the Apostle Paul, who was directly sent by God himself to go to the nations and preach and teach. And yet, guess what? He still had to take time out and use his skill as a tent maker to bring in income, which once again, tents were very needed back then. So you could be sure he made a pretty good sum of money to continue along with his ministry. Would you believe Jesus even had a job until, as you heard me mention, he was told otherwise? What do I mean by that? Well, from the time Jesus was born, and then, when he hit the adolescence age, he had to learn a skill, craft. And it was very normal back then. It was actually expected that you carried on the trade of your father. And so, the earthly man, if you will, that God put in charge of Jesus, Joseph, if you will, what was his role in this way, like an adopted father, so to speak, because remember, Jesus' life force and essence came straight from heaven and was just placed in Mary's womb. Now, with that being stated and being known, Jesus, when he started from a young age, he learned the skill as a carpenter, you see. And that's why, he was even called the carpenter's son. And sometimes people had a difficult way of viewing him as he got older and he was no longer doing that occupation. But all they could do is remember, that's what he was at least doing until otherwise told. When was he otherwise told? When he got in that water and presented himself to do God's will, in front of John the Baptizer, and he got baptized, and that dove, God's Holy Spirit came down from heaven, revealing all the many things that he needed to know for his ministry and his previous life. From that point forward, remember, he started gathering disciples. And we also know from further reading of the good book, they had a treasury chest, for persons to donate and show their appreciation for what they learned. So Jesus, in his important role in his mission, he no longer, could set aside and say, I'm going to make the most perfect couch that I can make, then I'm going to make the most perfect furniture I can make. No, his total role then, because from God, he was told otherwise, you have to really be over, the foundation of the Christian congregation, which is going to take up the majority of your time, you see. And so with that being said, that's how I meant, or I use the expression, see, he was told otherwise. Now, you continue to still look throughout history, you will find prophets, generals, and other persons, the founding father of Abraham, all of them, as you could see, they were hard workers, even when it came time to prepare meals and such at times for guests. You see, they participated in this. So all this goes to show that in general, not only in general, but really the assignment from God to men, especially being heads of household, they need to be able to work. There's a desire in them to work. Do you not agree? And so I wanted to share that with you today because you keep this in mind that, let's say, some persons may say, oh, this individual is such a workaholic. Well, maybe one way of looking at it, nobody is saying that the person should not make some type of adjustments in their life from the type of work they're doing or what have you. But still keep in mind, if this individual does have persons under their charge, see, there's a difference between being single and there's a difference between really having a family or even extended family that you have a responsibility for, you see. And so this is one reason why we do keep in mind that different people move at different rates, even spiritually. And so you still may see a person in that prophet role, so to speak, like Jesus. You heard me say recently, doing a ministry of what he was talking about, or talking to his disciples one time about how a prophet, you see, anyone who will receive a prophet, talking about, peacefully inviting to their homes, would receive a prophet's reward. So, that could be a variety of not only the ministry of talking about God and his kingdom, but back then, those prophets, those disciples, they were receiving, as you would call, downloads all the time anyway, when they were really needed. And so the people who accepted them in peace, the wonderfulness, the privilege, so to speak, to gain that additional encouraging knowledge was bestowed upon them. Jesus continued to say too that if they didn't accept a person of that nature, they really weren't supposed to browbeat and try to force their way into these ones' homes or what have you, because Jesus was saying they already showed a great lack of appreciation for what had come to their home in the first place. So they were not supposed to receive a prophet's reward. Okay? So again, with being a prophet, the many disciples, and even before then, you would notice that the persons took time to express themselves. If a prophet was in their town or came to their home and they fed them and things of that nature, because the prophets, they live very simple. Yet it always gave the people the opportunity in the role that they were in to still show their appreciation. And of course, God saw it. So thank you for being with me on this Perceptive Readers this week. And continue to remember, no matter how you may view this person's smartness, elevateness, or spirituality, they still have to make a tent sometimes. Take care of yourself. You have just listened to the Perceptive Readers podcast. Remember, until next time, if you read something that encourages you to improve or enhance your life for the better, it becomes your reality.